Hi everyone, and welcome to the final session of the People's Health hearing. We're so grateful. I've still got music playing, I'm so sorry, I'm going to stop that. Thank you, Fela Kuti. I think that was. Thanks so much everyone for joining the final session of the People's Health hearing. I'm Ben, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the co-organisers of the People's Health hearing.
Hi everyone, my name is Abi Devanayagam. Vanakkam everyone, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm also one of the co-organisers of the People's Health hearing. We'll just start off with the final session by once again reminding everyone what our intention for the hearing was. Our intention for today has been to bear witness to the health impacts of taking from our sacred lands and giving space to people who are not part of the formal COP26 negotiations. And as someone said earlier today, although we have platforms such as this outside of the COP space, our siblings here today are not part of that decision making, even though they bear the greatest health burden.
So we've heard stories and testimonies from communities at the front lines of climate violence and bearing disproportionately the brunt of climate change. And we've heard stories, testimonies, poems, and sharing the ways in which our extractive, exploitative economic systems are harming the health of people and planet. And in the final session, we're so grateful to have incredible listeners with us who have been part of this journey together with all of you throughout the day, listening to these stories. And so they will be weaving together their reflections from the day and from the online People's Health online gallery for the hearing, and also bringing in their own experiences of their activism and their resistance as we build collectively power for health and climate justice, moving forward together in solidarity.
We want to also highlight, as Ben said, the online gallery, which we've received some incredible contributions through a variety of media from all over the world, some brilliant artworks. Please go to www.peopleshealthhearing.org to see them. And I also want to signpost our Menti, which is an interactive map that we have as well, which you're very welcome to pin yourself to, but also please put your questions and answers, to the listeners during this session on the Menti, and we'll post the Menti link on the chat as well, just done there by Carvian.
So throughout the day, we've created this really beautiful space together. I want to welcome everyone that has been part of the space already today and has come to listen and share the stories and testimonies, and also welcome to everyone who are joining the People's Health hearing for the first time today. From the map that we can see, people have joined from all across the world, from different time zones, and it's been really wonderful to have you all with us for this session and throughout the whole day, so thank you. What we've been trying to do today is respect and make space for each other, to not make assumptions about people's identities and experiences, to not be defensive, and to be open to listen and learn. And there have been some really deeply powerful learning moments, I think, for us all throughout today. And when we don't want to tolerate any harmful, oppressive, or abusive behaviour. And if that comes into the space, we'll remove anyone that kind of goes against these care and justice framework that is holding us all together. It's been a lot throughout the day, and I'm sure we can all we all feel that in our bodies and in our hearts. And so if you've been if at ever any point you want to reach out to any of the co-organisers or each other, please do, and we're here to speak and reflect and process together today and beyond the hearing.
We also wanted to share with you the lamps that we lit at the start of the session. You can see that for each continent, the lamps are still burning at the end of the day. So without further ado, we'll welcome the listeners.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, for those that didn't join at the beginning of the day, Abby led a really beautiful ceremony welcoming us together in all of our struggles. So it's really lovely that they've been burning throughout the whole day. And thanks, Erica, for also burning the candle at your end as well. So we're going to briefly introduce the listeners again, and then the final session will work a bit differently. We're going to have quite a few different interventions and contributions from all of our listeners, and Abby and I will try and guide us through those different questions. But first of all, we're just going to reintroduce the listeners briefly. I know those who have been with us all day will have met them at various points, and we're really grateful for them all for being here for the final session. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Rosalinda Maan Tablang, who is actively involved in humanitarian and development work for a number of decades as a writer and researcher, and she's an active participant of the Ecosystems and Health Circle as part of the global People's Health Movement. Welcome, Maan.
Welcome also to the inspiring Kanahus Manuel, a mother, activist and traditional birth keeper, land and water defender and freedom fighter. Kanahus was born into a political family known for bringing their fight for their traditional territories to the international spotlight, and is a member of the Setwatmuk Women Warrior Society. And Kanahus's activism also includes prison justice work, including advocacy for the freedom and exoneration of Orlando Valley.
We have the incredible Tatiana Garavito, an organiser and facilitator on race, migration and climate justice, who's based at Tipping Point UK and Organising for Change. Welcome, Tatiana.
We welcome Ken Henshaw, Executive Director of We the People, an NGO based in the Niger Delta of Port Harcourt and Calabar.
We welcome Tamam Aludat, a Syrian physician. He's the Managing Director of the Global Health Centre in the Graduate Institute in Geneva, and he's worked with the Red Cross and Red Crescent and Doctors Without Borders.
And finally, thank you, gracias, Noemi Gualinga, for joining us. Noemi is part of the Sarayaku community peoples of the Ecuadorian Amazon region. She has been active in the struggle for her territory since she was 13 years old. Welcome, Noemi. Welcome, all listeners.
So yeah, a huge welcome to all of our listeners. We're so grateful for you being here with us and organising together this People's Health hearing. We're going to first of all start by inviting each of the listeners to introduce themselves in more detail and share what's brought them here and what has their journey been of fighting against our extractive and exploitative systems, and what's brought them here today and what brings us together. And we're first of all going to start with Maan, who is joining us from the Philippines, which is 8 hours ahead of UK time, so it's midnight. So we're so grateful for Maan being with us all day. I'm going to start with Maan, so can then take some space to rest at the end of a long day. So Maan, over to you.
Maan, you're muted.
I'm muted, yeah. So good day to everyone. Good morning to all the participants or those who attended the People's Health hearing. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for this very meaningful and fruitful day of sharing the narrative and the people's real climate situation and their struggle and their resistance against the climate crisis and the wanton plunder of resources and the environment. If world leaders and government who are here at the COP26 are really serious in solving the climate crisis, they should listen to what we are saying here at the People's Health hearing and other civil society initiatives and the People's Climate Summit. So I am Rosalinda Tablang. I am the project director of Samahang Operasyon Sagip. Samahang Operasyon Sagip is a broad network of disaster response NGOs and institutions based in the Philippines. Our main work is building the capacity and capacities of communities in taking care of their health and preparing the communities through the community-based disaster management approach. So our organization is really heavy and really focused on building the capacities of communities, which in case of disaster emergencies are really the frontliners or the first line of defense in confronting the adverse effects and coping and recovering from the disaster. So my experience in Samahang Operasyon Sagip exposes me to the reality of the wanton plunder of our country's very rich natural resources by big foreign mining corporations that induced the major disasters that we faced, especially in the last decades. We confronted Typhoon Pablo in Mindanao. We confronted, we were badly devastated by the strong Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. And just last year, we encountered another big disaster, which is the Typhoon Ulysses, which affected many parts of our country. This is what brought me here at the People's Health hearing. I have been an active part also of the People's Health movement here in the Philippines, and also an active member of the ecosystem and health of the global People's Health movement. So that's a little information about why I am here at the People's Health hearing. So the listeners were given 4 questions to reflect on. And I have answered the first question on what brought me here at the People's Health hearing. And the second question has to do with what is my reflection on all the sharing of communities, how they resisted extractivism and how they confront the climate crisis. So my reflection is that the People's Health hearing and the many testimonies, sharing, as well as the very rich materials that were given by from different organizations in different parts of the world, clearly and vividly show the impact of extractivism. All over the world, there is mining, exploration, oil palm plantation industry, coal plants, soybean plantation, dam projects, as shared in the testimonies. These are all happening all over the world. The people's narrative and stories and how their lives were disrupted and ruined by the extractivism and the adverse effect of climate change. I heard people and communities were deprived of their lands and livelihood. I have heard stories of how lands and water sources were contaminated and poisoned. I have heard how extractivism violate the right of the indigenous people, grabbed and ruined their ancestral lands, their identities, and their cultures. I heard how extractivism caused health problems and life-threatening illnesses, skin diseases, respiratory illnesses, and cancer. Climate-related disasters have caused droughts, extreme flooding, typhoons that devastated many vulnerable communities. And this is happening all over the world, not only in the Philippines. The many stories revealed familiar and notorious giant corporations, mostly from the global north. We have heard how Shell, Exxon, Mobil, Monsanto, Bandana, OceanaGold in the Philippines have destroyed the very rich resources of the many countries in the world. And this destruction are graciously and all willingness let in by national governments and the local big businesses in the various parts of the world. In the sharing, I heard cries and calls for climate justice, system change, system abolition. And that is how I reflect on all the testimonies and sharings that happened in the whole day. As to the second question regarding what gives you hope from the testimonies shared, what can we learn from the ways communities are resisting? I am really inspired by the many stories and the many narratives of struggles and resistance by many communities. The various ways by which communities are taking actions to resist and defend their lands and their rights are very inspiring. We can learn a lot from the experience of the Dipidio people, including some local executives were able to stop the operation of OceanaGold in the northern part of the Philippines. However, their fight are still continuing. We can also draw inspiration from the young indigenous people activists of Malaysia who weave their stories through their video production and the sharing of the representative from the West Papua New Guinea, how he changed. He wants to share his stories and change the stories being peddled by the media and the global south, global north. The solidarity action from various organizations from the global north, from the developed countries, are also a source of inspiration, especially for those in the developing countries who are being exploited and being oppressed by the big corporations. It is inspiring how community organizations conduct education and training, build their capacities, organize themselves to defend their lands and their lives. I am also very impressed and inspired by the global movement that is being built and being organized, like what we are doing here at the People's Health hearing. Legal actions, research, and activisms, they are all efforts and ways of resisting and protesting the crisis that we are experiencing right now. But in my view, however, the resistance, the struggle of the people faces so many challenges for environmental defenders and human rights defenders. Many of the communities right now face legal cases because of the resistance that they are doing. Many environmental defenders and human rights defenders are being arrested, being killed in most parts of the globe. In our communities here in the Philippines, many communities, especially those who have mining exploration and mining projects, are being bombed and families are being massacred. So those were the challenge that we have to face if we are going to continue, if we are going to fight against extractivism and the adverse effects of the climate crisis right now. And for the last question, here's my notes. How do visions of health and climate justice look to you, and how can we organize for this vision going forward? I really think that we should go, that the health and climate justice should go hand in hand with social justice, especially now that the onslaught of neoliberalism through unbridled extractivism will continue to worsen the global climate crisis and consequently ravage the lives and livelihood of health and resources, mineral rich of the many countries in the South. In the Philippines right now, we are confronted with so many mining permits because our government has lifted the moratorium that were ordered 6 years ago by the late president, and now Duterte has lifted this moratorium and are now allowing more mining companies to explore the natural rich resources of our country. So there should be social justice along the health and climate justice that we are demanding from the global South and those who are responsible for the climate crisis that we are facing. And in going forward, I really think that the stories and narratives of the people's resistance should continue to be shared and amplified to many parts of the world, and that efforts toward social awareness, raising, organizing, building capacities, alliance building, and solidarity to address and confront the root causes of climate crisis, exploitation, and oppression toward systems change should be continued and must be continued. The things that we are doing right now should be replicated and amplified to as many countries, many organizations, many communities. We should be heard, and the struggle must continue. So thank you, and good AM to all of you.
Thank you so much, Man, for your just like deep analysis of the stories and testimonies that you've heard and watched through the the hearing and contributions from across the world, and more powerful visions of how we need to go to the roots and tackle intersecting systems of oppression and how people and communities have been marginalized and oppressed, and what that vision going forward needs to look like as we build solidarity. So thank you, and sleep well, and thank you for all of your energy and contribution throughout the day and before the hearing and moving forward as well. We're really, really grateful. Thank you.
I will try to stay for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Man.
Thank you, Man. Please rest. We're going to now invite the other speakers to come in. We're going to ask the other speakers to answer one question at a time, to enable some discussion as well. So yeah, we're going to continue with that first question of for each listener to just share briefly and ask everyone to keep to kind of 2 minutes or so each of what's brought them here. And I know some of you have shared that already, but just so that we're all coming and grounding the space together.
So Kanahus, we welcome you to share what has brought you here to the People's Health hearing today.
Yes, thank you. What brought me here is that I really see that these larger global meetings, these global tribunals, are really necessary for us as Indigenous people. My grandfather, actually, Dr. Grand Chief George Manuel, he has passed on now, but he's the founder of the World Council of Indigenous People, which we really hope to revive. But I just want to slowly go over here because my Wi-Fi. But I want to just show you. I could explain to you, but I can show you too. We have a blockade on this road, right here and right here. And right here, back there, they really forcefully start building a man camp, an industrial worker camp for this pipeline expansion that we're fighting. And so what brought me here is because when we're on the ground, as Indigenous people, sometimes we feel very isolated and we feel very silenced, especially in the global community. And for me, being here, a part of this session and part of this space that you have created for us, is that it really puts the importance of what we're doing on the ground as Indigenous people, that our lives here on the ground mean something. And another thing that brought me here is because I'm a midwife and I'm a birth keeper. I bring life into our nation, and a lot of them are going to be warriors, these young ones that are being born. But another thing is just this simple symbol, and this is an international symbol, but it's the mental. I'm not pointing at the, can't really read, but the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical. And that's our health. And this symbol is around the globe. And some people say it's like a actual circle of the ever expanding universe. But that, and I think that people, especially frontline activists, people who are constantly fighting for the justice of everybody in the land, really need to look at that, because we can't fight with us injured, and any part of that's injured, our emotional, our spiritual, our mental, our physical, it throws us off. Sometimes we're going to put so much into mental and we're neglecting our spiritual or neglecting our physical health. And that's something that elders have taught me. It's just a simple thing to remember, but that's also what brought me here, is because we as individuals need to really look at our health, the ones that are putting so much forth for our people and for our land, and really looking at our own selves as being a symbol or a message that this is how the earth is. So, you know, they're destroying the earth and we're being impacted. And it's just like one of the Mayan medicine men said, even COVID and this global pandemic, our earth's lungs are being affected, and hence we're coming into these, you know, viruses that are affecting our lungs. So we can't think that we're not connected with this bigger global earth. The impacts that they're having on it are affecting us. And even in this global pandemic, you affect the lungs of the earth, it's starting to spiral and affect us and our lives. So there's prophecies that Indigenous people have throughout the world that, you know, we're going to start to see, like you said, the droughts, you know, the flooding, the impacts, these global pandemics. And really the ones that are going to survive are the ones that are going back to our original instructions of the earth. You know, what we eat, you know, we destroy to live. We have a economy, and it's a balance, it's a teeter-totter. You know, do we choose industry or do we choose life? And the more that we choose industry, it's going to take from our life and our land. And we have to be very serious now, because if we don't put the effort in and show the example to these next children, then, you know, if we don't fight hard and show them and leave them with less of a fight, you know, right now we're leaving our babies with a bigger fight. No, the work and the effort that we put in today is going to benefit the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanahus, and thank you so much for sharing what you're doing on the front line. Thank you also for reminding us about the fact that health is more holistic than physical and mental, and speaking about spiritual health as well. And that was very much needed, and also highlighting how important the health of ourselves is important whilst we're resisting, and that we need to look after our own health while we're resisting. Thank you so much. Next, I welcome Tatiana to share what has brought you here today to the People's Health Hearing.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. I'm going to speak in Spanish to take advantage of the fact that we have interpretation. So I live in London in the UK, and so today my mind works with both English and Spanish. So I always take advantage of the opportunities to speak in Spanish. So even though I'm in London now, I'm actually, or rather, even though I'm based in London, I'm actually in Colombia. So I am here, and we have a lot of groups that are organizing against the extractivist dictatorship, which for hundreds of years has existed here in Colombia and really in the entire global south as part of the process of colonization. So why am I here at this event? Well, for many reasons, but one of them is that from a long time ago, I have been working with a group called Tipping Point and Wretched of the Earth. And we have been organizing work around climate reparations. So within this framework of climate reparations, we talk about making reparations to these communities that have been affected for hundreds of years in these territories in the south, so that we can think about a change in the system. And this means that we have to stop using oil and using up all of these resources that we have in our communities. And we also need to stop these companies that keep exploiting communities and exploiting their territories. Yesterday, we had many organizations that are working around climate justice, gender justice, racial justice, housing justice. So there's many groups that are working from different points of view, came together to march during this huge protest that we had in places all over the world. And we know in London and in Glasgow, these were huge events. This is to show that climate change is this thing that's just going to solve itself, or that we're going to have easy solutions. No. We need to start with social movements, with civil society. We need to work all together to make these changes, to get rid of these systems that have violated people's rights, that have been exploitative, that have gotten rid of people's traditions, and all of these spiritual customs and traditions that we have worldwide. So I think that this is a good place where we can all think about together that, that we can't, save the world, right? Like, we can't think this way. We need to come together as a community to think how we're going to change these systems. And this is a space to be able to hear what people have been suffering, what consequences they have been suffering from these violent and exploitative systems. And from here, we can have strategies, we can have new ways of thinking and of coming together. So this is why I'm here. So it's been wonderful to hear everyone tell us their experience. One thing that really gets, like, it's in my heart, is to hear everybody. And I think it's very powerful to hear as well as to tell your story. So maybe after the event, we can all take a moment to see how we're doing, to reflect, because all of these things that we hear have a huge impact, obviously for the people that are living through this firsthand. But as our colleague reminded us, we have to be aware of the impact that these conversations have. What happens affects us, not just our bodies and our intellect, but also it affects us spiritually. So it's wonderful to be here and to keep talking about these topics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for being here with us on this journey, and for your really beautiful reflections of what's brought you here into the space, and for highlighting, that it's currently COP26, and we know that climate justice is not going to be brought to us by those with current decision-making power and the corporations. It's going to be from us and from the streets, and from the many. So thank you so much, Tatiana. I'm now going to welcome Ken into this space and say, please share with us about what's brought you here. And if everyone's kind of bringing in already their reflections on the roots of the injustices that have been highlighted today. So please reflect on that as well.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you. Am I audible? Excellent. Thank you so much. And so my name is Ken Henshaw. I work for an NGO based in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. It's called With the People. With the People is an organization that works in a specific space, which is Nigeria's Niger Delta. And Nigeria's Niger Delta is an area where oil has been extracted from non-stop for 70 years. At some point, Nigeria extracted up to 2.6 million barrels of crude oil every single day. Unfortunately, for many of the people who live in the area where crude oil is extracted from. Yeah.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, Ken. The connection's a bit interrupted. So if you maybe turn your video off and we can try that way.
Okay. Excellent. Is the connection better now?
That's better for me, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so to the next question, what brought me here? Justice brought me here. Justice brought me here. And that's one thing I have been fighting for my entire life. From when I was a kid, I got involved in the student movement at the age of 16, and it was the search for justice. Living in the Niger Delta, knowing the vast resources that was living the land, seeing the income of my parents dwindle, seeing the opportunities for generating income from traditional livelihood activities like and farming. I saw communities become destitute, and I got into the justice movement, and I naturally found myself in the climate justice movement. Ben, you're making a face. If my network work.
Sorry, Ken. The connection is just coming slightly in and out, and just want to.
Okay, so why don't I keep to some other person? Then I change my network. How about that?
Great. Yeah, we'll come back to you because I don't want to miss anything of what you're saying.
Absolutely. Let me log out and then.
Great. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. We'll go to Tamam. If you would like to share what has brought you to the People's Health hearing for those who have perhaps not heard what you shared with us earlier today.
Thank you. What brings me here is the generosity of the organizers who have considered me, and I say that because big part of what moves me now is a sense of regret, a sense of guilt, and I'll explain that in a few seconds. Because I come from a land, I come from the Levant, which is a land that has been occupied by everybody. I don't think there's an army that hasn't treaded over land in their way somewhere. And I come from a small village in the south of Syria where we're just a few kilometers north of an absolutely straight line that was drawn on a map by a French and a British ambassadors more than 100 years ago. The inability of us to challenge that over time has been impossible to deal with. And I come from a family that has grown up on the stories of my grandmother, who has died 10 years before I was born, at least, I think, and who I have never seen a photo of because I don't think one exists. And she was a healer. She was the person in that village who people went to get care, to get heard. She was the person who arbitrated debates. She was the one who helped people remember the land and the borders and who owns what and who does what. My father did a PhD in botany, and he has collected every plant that exists in Syria over 30 years and documented them. Many of them do not exist anymore. And my regret and guilt is one of having went to medical school in an urban setting in Damascus, a 5 million person city, partially because my father pushed me. In a dictatorship, he told me, you need to find a job where you can work for yourself and not be part of this government. And I got my head full very fast and very easily with smoke and mirrors of the myths we were fed. And I remember particularly a day when my father was telling me about a plant remedy. And I told him, and I was 20, that was a long time ago. I told him if it worked, they would have put it in a pill. And that conversation will never leave my mind. And I've haven't gathered the guts to apologize to him yet, now like nearly 25 years after that conversation. It took me 20 years to start figuring out where am I and others sitting on the wrong side of this debate, where we are made to subjugate people that we think we're helping, where medicine has become a tool of the empire. There were things to learn, except that we weren't told where to find them. And it took journeys of me and many others who are talking now. I've treated people and I've done my best with my understanding to help people I've worked in about 35 countries. And I can look back and see the places where everything we thought we were doing well was only partially well, because part of it was also preventing people from seeing the value of their communities and their cultures. So I have stood in opposition, even if unintended, to many people like my own grandmother. And that is the regret and guilt that I have to live with now. And this is what moves me now. We've heard many people today who talked about health in a way that I haven't heard. And I can tell you that this is not the way that it's being talked about in this place in Geneva that is called regularly the capital of global health, where the negotiations about our future and about the next pandemic and how are we going to stand up to it are taking place. And if we learn something, and I'll stop very soon, but if we learn something, that COVID-19 has collapsed even the pretense of solidarity in the formal, what is called the multilateral system. The moment things started affecting the rich, they stopped being a matter of philanthropy and charity. And whatever excuses we told ourselves before that this system might work, it's better than nothing, collapses with that myth. And it is time that it hasn't been ever clear in my mind, and I think in many people's minds, that philanthropy isn't going to work. If we're going to ask for something, it needs to be reparations. It needs to be the paying back of centuries of oppression and exploitation. And that's where health goes from being a manner of subjugation to a manner of emancipation. And I hope that we will learn that in the health sector from people who are active on climate and active on social justice. Thank you very much for having me again. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tamam, for, as with everybody, sharing, your deeply personal journey of being here and really driving to the roots of what's wrong with our biomedical model. And as a health worker, I really resonate with a lot of what you shared and my journey to here as well. So thank you so much for just a really deeply moving reflection, and from subjectification to emancipation, and medicine as a tool of empire. Those are so powerful and so on point, and in particular in the context of COVID, and Kanahus drew upon this really powerfully as well, reminding us of how we're deeply connected to the land, and we can't separate the health of people and the health of planet, and how, Tamam, as you said, it's collapsed even the pretense of solidarity, and how can we move forward from that? So thank you so much, Tamam. We're now going to invite Noemi to share more, Noemi, about your journey and what's brought you here, and touching upon. So thanks, Noemi, and welcome.
Alichishi liam bukai uyaukunang nyuka shamuni sarayaku liaktamanda. Muy buenas tardes con todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone who is here listening. I am from the indigenous community of Quechua Sarayaku peoples in Ecuador. Why am I here? Perhaps I represent our entire community. My community is part of a community where we are all responsible for everything that happens and everything that we want to improve for our community. I, in particular, have always been concerned about health in our community and elsewhere. That is the reason for which I put my name in to the invitees of this event. And that is why I am here. To tell a bit of my story, my community, Sarayaku, has been organizing for more than 40 years, maybe for 41 years. It was organized when I was still a young girl, so I grew up within this organization. Within this organization, everyone believed that we had a responsibility as a group. So I really have learned from that throughout all of my youth. We've always been active, not just in the area of health, in many different areas and activities and needs that communities have. For example, in 1992, we marched for the legalization of the territories because our territories were not legally recognized. So the state was the owner of what was in the soil. For that reason, we organized amongst ourselves. We marched to the capital. We did this to achieve recognition of the fact that our territory did have owners, that we were the owners, and that the resources there belonged to us and could not be touched. We've also continued organizing ourselves for education, language, for culture, to maintain all of that. Within all of that, we couldn't live thinking, I live for myself. We live for the entire community. We live for each other. Although it might seem something amazing to you, we are all fighting for something that we want, to have a good education, to have good health, fighting so that our languages are not lost. So in 2003, we also went up against the state because there was oil drilling in our area. We were the first community that really rose up against the state in Ecuador. They called us terrorists at the time. They called us many things, warriors and other names. At that time, after that time, we were able to take our case to the Inter-American Court. We were able to solve these issues. We do all of this in community. We couldn't do this as individual peoples. We always do this as a community. People that are in cities have their roles. People who are in our community have their role. Young people have their role. Grandmothers have their roles. Women have their roles. Men have their roles. But at the same time, we are united. We are together, standing for a single cause, which is we do not want our town and our community to be destroyed. We do not want for our town and community to suffer. This standoff with the oil companies and the lumber companies has reflected this. In Ecuador, there are communities in the north that have really suffered a lot, issues with allergies and cancer and other matters. And so in our community, we have really fought to raise our voices. For that reason, we've really been seen as rebels, as bad communities that want to stop development within a country. We've been seen as a community that wants a country or a government within another country or government. So I believe that for that reason, the name of my town is well known. And maybe that is why the invitation arrived to us. We, in accordance with our traditions and reality, continue on a daily basis fighting to maintain our nature, to maintain our living forest. We do not want to complain. We do not want to say, why does the government not help us with this? In my community, we have already written, and it can be seen in many places, that we are proposing or creating a proposal that comes from the community, from our own thoughts. And here we want to really present our cause, which is called Kwasa Sasha, and that means living forest. The forest is living all around the world, in the Amazon and in all jungles, all forests. These forests are alive. They are connected. All people that live within them are alive, from the smallest to the oldest. Humans have a relationship with nature, and nature has a relationship with humans. And we want this proposal to be received by the state, by the people who are responsible for looking after nature, or for listening to us. We want this living forest proposal to say that we do not want lumber and oil and extraction and mining to go on, because we do not want our forests to disappear. We want to build our own education, our own healthcare structures. And we want to maintain our community. We don't want our young people to lose what our ancestors left to us, because the language is important and the young people cannot lose it. So we are fighting within the community. We're like ants, all working together. So perhaps here I could say that every small place, regardless of how small it is responsible for defending its place. And so we are fighting in this way against climate change. We want to be recognized. The fight does not come from above. It does not come from those who are talking on the radio, from the government. The fight to change the situation with climate, to improve the situation, to stop climate change is really within us. It is with the people who are fighting. I'm hearing about everything that's happening around the world, in the Philippines, in Venezuela, and so many other places that are really similar. So we want our living forest proposal to also make it to other places. We want for it to be global. We don't want it to stay just with us. Previously, our trees, our hills, our nature was full of spirits and full of spirit, and now it is being killed with mines and oil extraction. When they come in with this industry, they destroy that and everything disappears. It is impossible to rebuild what human beings destroy. We need to build global awareness so that these big companies can understand that what they're destroying cannot be recovered. It is going to be completely destroyed. And in that way, nature is going to die. The people that live in the forests and in the jungles are going to die. Everything will be a desert, lifeless. Additionally, to continue a bit more, if you will give me the time, I can talk about how we, despite having fought for so many things and everything that I mentioned, we didn't really expect the pandemic to reach our communities. We did not expect that. The pandemic arrived, but before that, we had really terrible floods. I have heard about this in other places too, such as in Venezuela and in Brazil. There were terrible floods and they affected the plantations. People were left without their homes, without important goods. People were ill. So climate change arrived, and the COVID-19 pandemic did as well. And of course, the governments did not think of us. They did not remember us. They didn't think about our communities. They didn't have a solution for COVID-19, but the communities did indeed have the knowledge to deal with it. We survived thanks to knowledge about medicinal plants. We survived because of solidarity, because of harmony, because of brotherhood that we had amongst ourselves. And for that reason, we survived. The governments and the public health authorities did not think of us. They didn't have a solution. We can see that clearly. Thanks to all of this knowledge, our communities, in fact, during this time, returned to recover this forgotten knowledge. We were looking for plants that had largely been forgotten in order to use them. So the solidarity of communities has a lot to do with this. When a community lives in solidarity, they can continue on. In Ecuador and many towns in our area, they could overcome the pandemic and the struggles there because they lived in solidarity. And only the many different communities and the many people here that have their own knowledge and feelings were able to do this. They have their own spirituality, their own languages. Now I think I've spoken for a bit too long. I think that we are the ones who can really contribute to help to mitigate climate change. So we shouldn't be alone. Those of us that are fighting, we should organize in community groups. That is what works for a town, for a community. There's so much that I could say. I could speak for an entire day and never stop talking. But I think that for now, that's all I should say.
Gracias, Noemi. Thank you so much for your story. My heart really breaks for you, but your words of hope bring, I think, all of us some comfort. And even though, as you said, the spirit is gone from nature, I know that with your community solidarity, you're injecting that spirit back and you're keeping hold of that spirit. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would like to invite Ken back to this space because the signal wasn't good last time. So Ken, I invite you once again to share what has brought you here and also some reflections on the roots of these injustices.
Thank you so much. I hope my network is better now. Permit me to keep my video off. So like I said, justice brings me here. It is the quest for environmental and ecological justice. I live in a place that has been very terribly abused. I live amongst people who have lost livelihoods, who have lost farmlands, who have lost rivers, who can no longer fish, who can no longer go to the forest on account of oil extraction. I live in a place where the health connection to climate change and extractivism is very clear, absolutely clear. My colleague spoke earlier in the morning about this connection, Celestine. I mean, I work with Celestine very closely, and we have been to communities where you're driving, and the only social activity that happens over the weekend are burials, where people are getting buried, funeral ceremonies. They call them ceremonies in the Niger Delta. And you see posters on the wall announcing this or that funeral, and it is labeled at the top, "We thank God for the life well spent." And then you look at the age of the person, 25, 30. This is what brings me here. The fact that I realized at a very young age that things were not normal. Another thing that brings me here is that I hear that oil companies are divesting those who have traditionally caused the devastation of the environment, stolen people's livelihoods, destroyed the environment. They are currently divesting. in many instances, they are no longer calling themselves oil companies, they now call themselves energy companies, you know, and they are divesting and they are running away from historical damages they have done, including the health of the people. And the quest for justice is what brings me here. What brings me here also is the fact that we hear conversations around just transition, you know, and when they talk about just transition, all we hear about is a transition in terms of newer jobs, greener jobs, cleaner jobs, and so on and so forth. We never ever hear about the transition in people's health. We never ever hear about a need to carry out a health audit of the environmental impact of 70 years of oil extraction on communities in the Niger Delta. I believe most of the people participating in this event today are in Glasgow, you know. And I took a quick look and I Googled the life expectancy in Scotland. It's about 81 years. Life expectancy in Scotland for women is about 81 years, and for men it's about 76 years. In Nigeria, life expectancy is 54, and in Niger Delta is 43. And so if you're up to 40 years old, you're on your way out in the Niger Delta. That's what brings me here. The thinking and the need and the belief that we need to go beyond the conversations we're currently having around climate change. We need to dig deep and find out what impact has it had on the health of the people, what impact has it had on the livelihoods of the people, and how can we transit in such a way that the health, welfare, livelihood, environment, and ecology of the people are taken into consideration as we make that transition. Last thing that brings me here is the need for us to make appropriate and correct connections. We live in an ironical state in Nigeria. Yeah, Nigeria is one of those frontline communities most heavily affected by climate change. In 2012, in the Niger Delta, we saw sea levels rise by about 2 meters. We saw whole communities inundated with water. Livelihoods were lost, farming seasons destroyed. People had to basically migrate. In the Lake Chad region in Nigeria, we've also seen the rise of perhaps the most deadly insurgency, Boko Haram, in the northeast of the country, occasioned by the fact that climate change has caused a drying up of the Lake Chad, which used to be a hub for fishing, farming, grazing, and all that. It used to be a livelihood for the people. And as the lake disappeared on account of climate change, as the lake disappeared, so did people's livelihoods disappear. And people became destitute and became susceptible to that. We've seen that, and unfortunately, the connection has not been made that one of the major contributors to climate change is the oil being extracted from southern Nigeria. It is causing the same thing that is causing problems to the people. And I come here today because I think that those connections need to be made. And we can make those connections by having these kind of conversations that happen outside the COP. Because the kind of voices I heard here today, the narratives and the stories we heard here today, it will never be heard in the green zone or in the blue zone. And that's why this is very, very important to me. If you like, Ben, I could go on and talk about my reflections a little bit. Or there's another time for that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it felt like a textbook, yeah? It felt like different chapters of a textbook, just listening to different people speak about their experiences, what's happening in various countries. And the patterns are basically the same. The patterns of repression are the same. The fact that people are suffering climate change impact through increased flooding. The fact that companies, are grabbing people's lands, are grabbing people's forests, military occupations in different places. It felt as if they were reading from a Nigerian playbook. The exact same effect, exact same impact everywhere. And pretty much well established in this conversation today that oil extraction is causing health challenges. And I think it was Goran who was able to make a clear, distinct link with that. And I can tell you about the links we have also made in the Niger Delta. We have something called black soot, which is a black byproduct of hydrocarbon extraction and gas flaring. It is causing health challenges. A woman recently had an expert advice from outside the country where it said that people coming from Rivers State, the city where I live in the next 20 years, will be having a lot of deformed babies on account of the hydrocarbons people are breathing. And my colleague Celestine also said it in the morning, that benzene, a cancer-causing substance, is in the water people in the Niger Delta drink 900 times above safe levels. And guess what? People still drink that water. I'm probably going to drink that water again this evening. Yeah, and that's the reality of what people are passing through. And I also heard from the conversation today that it seems clearly that the world is still thinking on the same path of extractivism, the very same path. And it doesn't seem, I mean, you can see this from the theories. I mean, every day in the different COPs every year, there are new ideas being thrown up, either about carbon offset, you know, or any sort of solution, you know, just to, I mean, anything to deviate from taking real climate action, you know, stopping the burning of fossil fuel. So the world is still basically along that trajectory. Nigeria just passed a new petroleum industry law, which says that oil extraction is going to even expand, meaning that even while the Nigerian president is at the COP, he has no intention of stopping either gas flaring or oil extraction. And I heard also in this conversation, something from Gopal Krishna, that false solutions are compounding the problems of climate change. They are really compounding the problem and leading to health challenges. And I have my examples of that. Red Plus being implemented in Niger Delta of Nigeria is causing devastation amongst people, driving them out of their forests and all that. And I think that there are a few conversations which I heard very little of today, and that is the gender dimension to the challenge. I didn't hear very much about the gender dimension. And I think that climate change and oil extraction and its impact is reinforcing gender discrimination, and it's happening even right here in my own country. And I think that I heard one of the things I hear from the conversation we had today is that climate change and climate solutions are taking a racist dimension, simply because the people who contributed least to climate impact are the ones suffering the greatest impact, and are also the ones being expected to offset, you know, the impact of climate change. And I think that is a reinvention of racism. And it's ironic that after 500 years of racial discrimination, 500 years of slavery and all that, climate change emerges and it's still back to the same paradigm. And I think that the conversation needs to change. And one of the ways we can change this conversation, I think, is that we need to decolonize the climate conversation. It has to be decolonized. I think that we need to start looking, and I heard this from Simeon, we need to start looking at this conversation, the conversation around climate change, without our beautiful blue eyes. We need to look at this the way it is, you know, as a real problem affecting people differently. And one of the things I heard from very profound speakers today, like Hans and all that, was that we tend to think that climate solutions lie somewhere in the COP, lie somewhere in world leaders. No, contrary. On the contrary, climate solution lies with frontline communities who have been dealing with this mess for upwards of 100 years, and that we need to hear them more. But unfortunately, the spaces currently provided for such conversations never ever feature them. There are no green or blue zones for communities in the Niger Delta, or for communities in Papua New Guinea to step up and then speak. But I have visions of hope because I've heard stories of resilient communities who have, you know, come together, the Ogonis, people in Papua New Guinea, who are fighting the battles, who are pushing back on corporate land capture, corporate sea capture, and extractivism. And my vision, how this conversation around health and climate justice moves forward, is that from this kind of space is being created by people like you, I see a situation where the health impact of climate change will become a deeper and more integrated part of conversations around climate change, especially when we speak about just transition. A chapter will be dedicated to discussing the health impact. And that's the vision I see. A vision where everybody, those impacted by health, those who have lost livelihoods, those who have lost their environment, will be taken along in that conversation. I know I've taken a bit more time than I should have, but thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity.
Thanks so much, Ken. And I'm really grateful that we waited so your connection was better, and just really heard in all the ways of what's brought you here. I'm really going to the heart at the full solutions that are being talked about in the formal spaces at COP, and what your hopes and visions are for justice, and something that I wrote down was just a just transition and a transition for people's health, and how that needs to be brought into the space and decolonizing the climate conversation. And you really beautifully articulated the intersectional ways in which oppressive systems work to marginalize and oppress. So just thank you so much, Ken, for everything you've brought into the discussion, and for all of your resistance. And we stand with you. And you also beautifully transitioned us into maybe the final question that I'm going to put to the rest of the listeners. So thank you, Ken. So Abby and I wanted to give as much space for everyone to share. And as always, as Noemi beautifully said as well, we could be here. It's been a really powerful, wonderful day coming together, and it could be many more days. But with the time left with us today, it would be really lovely to come back to each listener in turn, and building on what Ken just said about hope, and is something that we've heard throughout the stories today. And Simone, one of our speakers earlier, quoted Mariam Kaba. And in Glasgow last night, Asad Rayman, one of the co-organisers of the COP26 coalition, quoted Rebecca Solnit of hope as a practice, and how we come together and take action, and where there is uncertainty, we take action, and that is hopeful. So I want to bring us back to hope and what everyone's visions of health and climate justice are going forward, and bringing in everything that Ken just said about how that is intersectional. So I'm maybe going to come back to Kanahus first. Thanks so much, Kanahus.
Sorry, obviously we want all the listeners to share their visions of hope, but we want all the participants to be able to share their visions as well. So please go on www.menti.com and please type in the code that Kavian has just put in here, or you can use the link that Kavian has put in the chat to also add your visions of hope for climate justice and health justice. So sorry to interrupt, but yes, Kanahus.
Thank you for everything, and thank you for the previous speaker for sharing. That really touched my spirit all the way over here. Just because we're dealing with the same pipeline, we're dealing with the same oil extraction, the Alberta tar sands, you can see from space, and it's coming all the way from a pipeline, all the way from Edmonton, all the way to the Coast Salish territories out near Vancouver, which is a 1,000-kilometer pipeline, 890,000 barrels per day that they want to pipe through. And we're standing in the path right now, and we have elders here, and my children are usually here too with me. And so it's our families that are being and coming out on the front lines. But one of our visions for hope is that we can continue to drink this water. Right past on the other side of that industrial worker camp that we're resisting is Blue River, and we can get right down on our knees and we can drink right from that water. And all the way up along this pipeline, 1,000 creeks, rivers, and streams, we can get down on our knees and we can drink right from that water. That's how pure it is. And our land, our territory is called Suqatmuk'uluh, the land of the spilling waters, from the very first drop in the glaciers in our mountains, as it flows and touches all life all the way to the ocean. Forms many of the major rivers here in so-called British Columbia. And one of the main reasons that we come from the only interior temperate rainforest in the world, and it's right behind me in this map, 180,000 square kilometers. But my father, he has passed on now, but he always said, like, what happens if they gave the land back to you today? 180,000 square kilometers, all these mountains. And how are you going to manage it? How are you going to look after it? You know, uphold your responsibility to it, and to start to be really start thinking along those lines of being the title holders to 180,000 square kilometers of territory, and how we do manage it, and how some is only allocated for hunting, and some is we have to protect these headwaters because it flows into our salmon bearing rivers and streams, and start living it and exercising and asserting who we are as Secwepemc people, and not just living as if the Crown or the Canadian government has any type of authority over us. And that's how we live, and we're taking land back, and we're a part of a big movement, and Indigenous people globally land back, and you just hashtag land back, and you're going to see Indigenous peoples from around the world taking land back, and really inspired by other Indigenous peoples around the world, and that they're not going to give us our land back. We have to fight, and we got to resist in every means to do it. And we have to have stories like our brothers and sisters in the Niger Delta. We need to tell our people this is what they want to do to us, because they're trying to trick Native people now to buy this pipeline. They're trying to trick Native people that oil business is good business. No, we go with the stories of the Niger Delta, and we go and we tell our elders and we tell our children, no, this is what they did to them. They can't even drink from the rivers anymore. They can't bathe in the rivers. And this is why sharing these stories and this collective knowledge and this collective intelligence is going to be is so beneficial to us as people in this fight, because we can retell these stories to our people. And our hope is that we can have our babies out in our territories free, without any type of Western medical intervention, just like we did, 1,000 years ago. We were able to have our babies free. We're able to heal our people with all of our plant medicines and our spiritual knowledge and our animal medicines and everything that was taken from us from the Indian residential school and colonization. And that colonization, the displacement of us from our lands, and the dependency on their system and their food systems and their medical system and everything. And when we stand up, we're oppressed and we're criminalized, but we will still continue to resist that colonization. And that the dependency that we have on oil and gas, the dependency that we have on their economic structures, their colonial systems, those are dependency that we can break away from. And I'm an example of that. I gave birth of 4 of my children alone in the mountains, so I can show my nation that we can continue to do this and practice our way again. And, I refuse to go to the hospital. I go and I find all of our alternative medicines that are really are like based off of the land and based off of community, and just so much hope. But I'm just glad that I was able to participate in this, and glad that I got to listen to everybody there. I'm going to take all of this knowledge and share it with our tiny house warrior village here today. I'm going to be starting a tattoo and for one of the sisters whose birthday it is with Tiny House Warriors, and then we're going to be accepting a human rights award. There's only 7 given out, and we're receiving it. And so today in a couple more hours, we're going to be joining together our whole crew here at Tiny House Warriors and accepting that. So, everyone who fights for our health, they're doing human rights work. They're doing the human rights work for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanahus. We are all so proud of you for your award. It's so well deserved, and thank you for sharing that good news with us in this space. We're really honored to have heard that good news. And something that stood out for me is you said that this collective intelligence and telling of stories is important for different communities to hear all these stories. And I'm sure we'll all go away and tell these stories and share the stories that we've listened to here, and the stories that we've witnessed. I will pass on to Tatiana for your vision of hope. If I'm really sorry to have to do this, but if we could keep it to just 1 or 2 minutes, that would be great. But yeah, I'm really sorry. It's just in the interest of time. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, one of the hopes that I have is for all of us to maybe understand that, as others have said, that the transformations that we need are not going to be decided or done in those spaces like COP, but it's really in our hands to transform the different ways in which these systems in which we live oppress and violates our communities around the world, and that also, like, there is a ongoing climate washing that happens in these spaces. So for all of us to be mindful about the stuff, the information that comes through, you know, these kind of like gatherings of world leaders, because a lot of it is just a lot of performance and a lot of like empty promises that governments don't really follow. So the organizing, the centering those at the front lines needs to continue, needs to be ongoing in like every place where we are. So my hope is that, you know, while we continue to organize and while we continue to be reminded about like who the lives and the people that are paying with their lives and their livelihoods for, you know, the big polluters that are destroying our planet. Yeah, so for all of us to remember whose lives those are. And as I was saying before, for all of us also to get behind this idea of reparative justice, right? Of making sure the big polluters like coal, oil, gas companies really pay the debt, that the historical debt and current debt that they have to communities around the world. And this is not even a moral kind of like argument. It's like, it's the, you know, one of the only strategies that we really have in order for us to be able to, ensure that communities around the world can continue to exist and can continue to thrive. So I really hope that, you know, all of us, continue to reflect on like the deep work that we need to do. And, you know, like one of the things that I always say is that these kind of like debates and, you know, information that comes through us, and also how sometimes, and well, many times how the NGO sector works, is that it's kind of like divides all of the struggles that we are working on. And like also my hope is for all of us to be able to find and build our collective power by unifying, by integrating our struggles, and so therefore the strategies and ways how we're going to be transforming the world. So a lot more hopes, but I think I'm going to leave it there so that we can hear from others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for that beautiful vision of hope and finding and building our collective power by unifying our struggles. And I'm sure we're all like take us deeply with us today. We're then going to go to Tamam, and again, I'm so sorry for running over. But yeah, it'd be wonderful to
I will be
speak.
very fast. I will recall a playwright from Syria whose name is Sadallah al-Nus, who died about 25 years ago. One of the lines that he said that I couldn't forget is إننا محكومون بالأمل وما يحدث اليوم لا يكون نهاية البشرية. What he says is we are bound by hope, and what happens today cannot be the full potential of humanity. And he said it in the middle of a brutal dictatorship that prosecuted him. He saw hope in some of the worst situations politically that can be imagined. What gives me hope is the organizers here. This is a generation that has seen things that we have failed to see, that many of us have failed to see when we were your age, and that gives us hope. You are rising up, not waiting for someone to lead you. You are leading the way, and that's hope. We are looking at going out of this exclusivity of knowledge, the tools that are exploitative, the ways, the internet and social media and so on, the universalism that we were told is the whole truth that comes from Europe and the West is crumbling, despite the tyranny of knowledge exclusivity and the single-mindedness of what is called science today. And knowledge is being taken out. And the exchange that happens today, among many other exchanges, is debunking this you indigenize and people will never learn anything from each other. Here they are learning from each other, and this is hope. And this is the learning, this is the, in a nod to Paulo Freire, this is critical consciousness being created as we speak. This is the pedagogy of the oppressed that emerges as it's needed. The last thing I will say is what gives me hope is the arrogance of power, is the people who are sitting in Glasgow and think that they have their places secured and fail to read the signs and fail to see the land that is shifting underneath their feet. And the last thing is, I still need to find my way, as I think everybody should. And I don't want to live in a world where kids who might die of measles don't get a vaccine because we rejected medicine altogether. What I want and hope is for us to be able to take back medicine from people who made it something reasonable to develop a $2 million therapy per patient into being a simple tool that is available and that is scientific and that can be used by people as they see fit, rather than imposed on them as others think it should be. There's a distinction between what lies underneath and how is it being exploited. I wish for a day where those tools of medicine can be used by people to their own interest at their own terms rather than at someone else's. Thank you very much for having us again. It's a privilege.
Thank you so much, Tamam, for that, and thank you for sharing the poem. Thank you everyone for your visions of hope. We also had some visions coming through the Menti as well. Noemi, I know you shared your visions and hope just towards the end of your last talk, but would you like to share any final comments on hope and your visions?
Siempre hay una esperanza.
Well, there's always hope. I can tell you because we have had that experience. For us, in 2002 and 2003, we were fighting against the oil companies and the state. And everybody said, you're going to lose. You can't win against the state. You can't. There's too few of you. Just let it go. There's nothing more that you can do. Just give up. But my people, since we came together, we had hope that we were going to be able to win. And many things happened that I can't go into detail here. But in the end, we were victorious. And so that is why there's always hope. What's happening in our communities is that we're always living like from one thing to another. So I'm sure oil companies are going to go away and the mining companies are going to go away, but then somebody else is going to come. Because they're there. They're everywhere in other places, and the state is putting us in a corner. Our current president has said that he's going to open up the borders to the oil companies, But at the COP, he's going to, say something really nice about the Galapagos Islands. So he doesn't understand, because if the Amazon is what brings the most oxygen to the world, it seems like he doesn't understand why he went to COP26, because he did not have a clear message. So yes, it's nice that he wants the Galapagos Islands to be a natural reserve, but for us, we just always have to have hope. To have hope that we can do something good, that we can be victorious, united, because maybe with 1 or 10 people, it's not enough. We have to add more people. And if it's a community, then it has to be the majority of the community or the whole community. Because if all of these communities don't come together, then it's not going to be doable. They're always trying to divide our communities. They're trying to manipulate certain people. But we cannot allow that to happen. We need to understand right now that we have to decolonize ourselves and decolonize the people who have always colonized us, because that's where our problem lies. Because we've always been dominated in our minds. So now is a time where we must decolonize ourselves and decolonize everything, the whole state, the whole nation, on a global level. So I think that the last thing we have to do is lose hope. We can't do that. Sometimes maybe we do lose hope because we get tired, but young people have more strength, more energy, because they have seen what their parents and grandparents have struggled with. So hope continues. So I can tell everybody, don't lose hope. Because even if I lose hope, my children will have hope, and that is my message.
We have a few reflections from the wider group as well. Thank you, Naomi, so much for your contribution there and telling us not to lose hope. I'll read one out if that's okay. Someone says, may we all become aware that we are indigenous to our earth, each a beating, breaking heart rooted in a unique place on earth, grow and evolve into our true natures as humanity. It's in our hands, our hearts, our ways of relating in a web of life. Thank you to whoever shared that on the Menti.
Thank you so much to everyone, and to all of you for being with us through this journey, and for the People's Health hearing. And really importantly, this is not the end, and that's so clear from all of the listeners' reflections, from all of the stories and testimonies that we've heard today, that we have hope. And I can't say it more beautifully than the contribution that Abby just read out. But we're going to take that with us going forward. And in a few minutes, thank you also all for being with us. I know we've gone over. I'm sorry for that, but thank you for being here. Tatiana in a moment is going to close the hearing with a ritual. But before we do that, just want to invite everyone again we want to create this space together going forward, and build on the solidarity that has been shared today into the future, and we want to create that together. So Kavian is maybe going to share in the chat as well further places for all of us to share our reflections from the day, and also our visions for how we continue to create this space and these futures together. And we will be sending afterwards through a form of a way to keep in touch, and so that we can gather again in the not too distant future to continue these discussions and these conversations, and we'd love for all of us to be part of that. So just thank you. Just finally, as well, people have asked in the chat, but the People's Health hearing has been this long journey, as Rhiannon and Bar shared at the beginning of the day, and from all of us, the co-organisers, MedAct, Health for a Green New Deal, Race and Health, Students for Global Health, Health for Future, Actions Speak Louder Than Words, and the People's Health Movement, Ecosystems and Health Circle. We're just so grateful for all of us coming together here and beyond as we continue to unify our struggles and build our collective power. So thank you. And a huge thank you before we go to Tatiana, just to all of the incredible interpreters. I'm going to take us onto gallery mode, so hopefully everyone can hear, but just huge love.
Woo!
Yeah, just huge love to all the interpreters and everyone as part of the COP26 coalition who have brought together the People's Summit for Climate Justice, that is continuing over the next few days. And there are lots of events online like this where from all parts of the world we can come together and gather and share our struggles and share our visions. So please do come to that as well.
Thank you very much to all our contributors who have come throughout the day from different time zones. Thank you so much for your commitment. Thank you also to everyone for participating in the online gallery. They couldn't join us to be present today, but they are with us online through the art that they've shared. If there's nothing further to say, thank you. We'll pass on to Tatiana to guide us through the closing ritual.
Thank you so much. So I think this, more than a ritual, this is going to be an invitation. As we talked about earlier, we've heard and felt a lot throughout this day. And one of the things that I feel happens a lot is that, you know, we hear stories, we hear testimonies, we hear communities sort of like sharing their struggles and the things that they're going through, and us just forgetting, because we usually tend to just connect with our minds. So I just wanted to offer or invite you to maybe think about like how we can remember this day, which I think was really powerful. And, you know, some of the organizers said it's the first time that something like this happens. And I wouldn't like us, and we wouldn't like us, to just forget what has happened today and just go on as normal and, you know, business as usual, as we, you know, we sometimes tend to do. So the invitation here is for us to maybe like, grab an object that you think is going to be with you for the next years or decades, or for the rest of your life if you can. And I'm going to invite you to just, you know, just give you a second or so, or a minute, to go and grab it and just to hold it close in your heart. Thank you so much. I see some people already grabbing those objects. I'm going to have my glasses, because I'm going to be with them, I think, for the rest of my life. I mean, they might change, but I'm going to try and do a bit of a ritual every time I change them. I see that people are grabbing objects, and yeah, so I'm just going to ask you, if you can, to just get that object and just for you to put it or place it around your heart area. If you can. If that's not available to you, just like hold it in your hand. And I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes if you can, or lower your gaze. And just to take a couple of deep breaths. Just checking in with your body, your spirit. That is more than, you know, our brains, our full selves, and in a way also how, you know, we are connected to each other, even if we are in front of a screen. Just see the quality of your breath, how you're feeling, if you're feeling anxious or nervous or relaxed, or if you're feeling, you know, any tension, if you're feeling tight, and just take a couple of deep breaths again. And as you're holding your object, hopefully an object that is going to stay with you for some time, I'm going to ask you to just send a lot of energy, a lot of that energy that you're feeling at the moment into that object. And just to build a relationship with that object if you can. The invitation here is for us to, every time that we encounter this object, to remember what has happened today, to remember the voices, the struggles, the testimonies, the lives of all of those people that have shared today, and all of those that have shared through those testimonies today. Just going to ask you to take another deep breath. If you need to stretch, or if you need to put your hands up, just do that if you need. And if you can just start opening your eyes. Thank you so much for joining in this invitation, and thank you so much for the organizers for having us here today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tatiana, and thank you so much, everyone. And have a really wonderful rest of your day, sleep, wherever you've been joining from around the world. And yeah, huge love and solidarity, and we'll see everybody soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.